Practical, sensible, conservative. Is that you? Well, even if it's not, chances are you're gonna need a compact SUV in the $30,000 to $40,000 range like the Nissan Rogue or the Subaru Forester. We're comparing two 2025 models. The Forester is brand new for 25, the Rogue is carrying on as it did before for the last few years. Both of these cars offer different ways to get a compact SUV. Similar room, but different powertrains, different technology, and a different driving experience. Let's drive them and find out. Subaru has made a Forester for nearly 30 years. This is the 6th generation, new for 2025. The Rogue was new since 2008, and it's been new since 2021 as the 3rd generation. Both of these cars have their loyalists, especially Subaru. So let's see which one really is better. The Subaru is brand new, but it's very difficult to tell that it is. Because it's a Subaru, things evolve at a glacial pace, similar to how I'm feeling right now. But the headlights, the grille, the wheels, that's all different, and it changes depending on which trim you order, including the upcoming 2026 Forester Wilderness. That one is definitely looking a lot snazzier than before. And the Sport model also includes some bronze wheels. This one is the premium. It's the 2nd of 5 trims. It's a little bit more basic looking, but the upright glass, the tailgate, the doors, all of it just screams Forester, and all of it screams nice and easy. Not long ago, the Rogue and the Forester both were pretty plain. Now the Rogue, especially on this platinum trim, is a whole lot snazzier. For 2024, Nissan updated the front grille and the bumper designs, plus the wheels. And on this platinum trim for 2025, there's no changes, not that they needed it. The lines are crisper, it suggests a larger, more expensive SUV than that Forester, and looks can be deceiving in any car. But for me, when I'm looking at this Rogue, from the squintier LEDs on top, to the bigger wheels, to just the way the greenhouse is, there's not as much glass as the Forester, but it has a more premium feel to it, despite the Forester being called premium trim. The Rogue and Forester are roughly equal in terms of length and width. They're just a few tenths of an inch apart. But it's the Rogue that has the longer wheelbase, 1.4 inches extra. And the Forester rides taller, 1.6 inches up to the roof. It's also higher off the ground at 8.7 inches. And the Rogue isn't too far behind at 8.2 inches. The Subaru is like sitting inside the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. There's glass everywhere, tons of light. That's what they say in real estate, right? All the natural light. Well, they mean it here in Subaru land because look at all the room you got. Low shoulder lines, tons of visibility. And versus the Rogue, there's almost 2 inches of extra legroom and almost an inch of extra headroom. Forget about that big touchscreen in the center. The steering wheel, the gauges, the switches, the stalks, everything feels about 20 years behind in the Forester. That can be a good thing because it's easy to learn inside this car. The fabric on the seats is also a high quality. Plastics are not as good as what's in the Nissan. You're gonna find that the Subaru is very familiar. Now you can get brown leather and nicer features on the top touring trim, but no matter which Forester you choose, it is basic inside here. You can only get this semi-aniline leather, that's the softer grade of leather in nicer luxury cars, on the platinum trim. But it's a worthy upgrade, and it looks even better than the brown leather than you'll find on the touring version of the Forester. If you're spending money on a Rogue, you get a lot. Almost infinity levels of luxury here. You get matching leatherette on the dash, the console, the doors. So many soft contours. And the fake wood and aluminum trim that you're seeing are actually pretty convincing. And there's actually more physical controls inside this Rogue, despite extra screens, than the Subaru. The Rogue just feels like a more modern SUV, not just the screens and the digital instrument panel, but the driving position. Although the sightlines outside, while they're nice, they're not nearly as big as that of the Forester. The Forester has about another inch of legroom, about equal headroom versus the Rogue. And like the top Rogue trim, you can get heated outboard seats and side window shades. No third zone climate, but there's USB ports, and because this sunroof extends so far back, it feels very airy back here. Top trims of the Rogue have third zone climate, heated outboard seats, side window shades, and a panoramic moonroof that extends really far back. And there's just tons of room no matter which trim you choose. Behind the second row, the Rogue has a lot more space, 36.5 cubic feet versus 27.5. If you're folding all the seats down, just about 74 over here, and the Forester does 69. But if you're choosing the base Forester, you're getting almost equivalent levels of total cargo space, but you're gonna have to opt for that base trim, whereas the Rogue just has more space overall. Subaru's dependable Boxer 4 is still in the Forester, making similar numbers like it always has. But it's the Rogue's smaller inline 3 that makes a lot more horsepower and torque, and those numbers really count on the road. Continuously variable transmissions for both cars, but it's the Subaru that has standard all-wheel drive, and it's a more rugged system that's always putting power to the ground on those four wheels versus the Nissan, which comes as a front-wheel drive car on every single trim as standard. Fuel efficiency, the Rogue is better, but for 2025, Subaru is now offering a Forester hybrid with really good fuel economy in the mid-30s and more horsepower and torque. And if you're considering towing, you really shouldn't with either of them. They're only rated for 1,500 pounds. The Forester has an 11.6-inch touchscreen that looks better than it actually is. It's legible, there's a lot of big icons here, but try using the climate controls. Sometimes these don't work properly. Now, the old Forester had tons of physical controls. This one only has temperature, front defroster, and rear defroster. And yes, there's volume and tuning knobs, but operating this on the go is actually a lot more complex than it used to be. Apple CarPlay, that's here, that's all great, but really, there's not many vehicle apps, and when you try to use the settings, again, the interface, it just looks really amateurish and old. You want to adjust the X mode, that's also here in the touchscreen. It wasn't like that before. So Subaru's actually made things more complex when Subaru's whole reason of being, the whole reason why they design anything, is to be simple. This goes against that. And also, the cameras aren't nearly as good as what you'll find in the Rogue. That's all you get. The analog gauges look good, but the central display, there's hardly anything on there. And all you can do is really adjust driving modes from the steering wheel. It just looks old and outdated, just like the rest of the touchscreen. Now, the Forester Hybrid is going to have a full screen interface with full screen maps, but for now, that is not available on any 2025 Forester. SL and Platinum trims have this Google OS system, a 12.3-inch touchscreen. Looks a whole lot better than the 8-inch that's standard on the other trims. Definitely worth the upgrade. You get Google Maps, Google Assistant, the Google Play Store, and wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto that require a wire on all those 8-inch trims. But what you see on here, there's some new features for 2025, especially the cameras. There's a wider front angle view, you get nice side cameras, and there's also an underbody view that will attempt to render what's underneath the vehicle. Land Rover did this first, and it is very useful on the Rogue. In an off-road mode, it'll stay on while you're driving. The Rogue's instrument panel does a lot. The graphics are crisp, they look really upscale, and they don't have anything crammed in here, including the maps. If you want everything to be larger, you just switch it here right on the thumb wheel. Responds really well too. And Pro Pilot Assist is also very useful. 2.1, which is optional in SL and Platinum, will steer the vehicle and brake by itself. It's a hands-free system. Lower versions of the Rogue also have Pro Pilot Assist that has steering assist, just not the full hands-free option. That's a big deal for 2025. And if you go into the settings, everything here is very easy to use. All of this is grayed out, or most of it is when you're driving, but you have a lot of customization. So all of your systems are actually on the instrument panel as opposed to the touchscreen. But once you use this system, I think it's finding to be very, very easy. The Forester, being light, can handle an engine this size, but it's decidedly lazier and definitely grittier than the 3-cylinder in the Rogue. But once you're at speed, feels like you're driving a big greenhouse in here. I love that about Subarus, and the Forester has never changed in that respect. This door sill, honestly, it's like a car that was built in the 90s, like it never had to change, and that's a good thing. Windshield's massive, the sightlines are so much better than the Rogue. Any Subaru, but particularly the Forester. Just big glass, low shoulder lines. They can go here, there, everywhere. Look at this, just like a ton of light that you're just not getting in most SUVs. Non-premium or premium. Wind noise is pretty apparent, similar to the Rogue. And the performance, well, that's very obvious. It cannot keep up with that Turbo 3, it just can't, especially on hills. There's a sport mode. Really all that does is just keep the engine louder for longer, so I don't ever use it on these cars. The funny thing is that Forester used to have a turbo that made 250 horsepower. That was the Forester XT. That was quite a while ago, and that car really boogied. But I guess that was a bit too fast for Forester owners, so we're back to where we were in the 90s. I'm kidding, but I'm also not, because Subarus really do drive like they did 30 years ago, which is great for a lot of people, but in terms of comparing it to other brand new SUVs, objectively, it's just going to lose. And the steering also just doesn't have that secure off-center feel. As soon as you move the wheel, it's like it's not really as in tune as that Rogue. And this is from a company that builds the WRX and the BRZ. So I know Subaru can tune steering rack, but none of that goes into the Forester. And I wish some of it did. The way I'm driving is how most Subaru drivers don't drive, because they don't have the power. Sorry, it's really fun to make fun of Subaru drivers. I like Subarus. It's gonna sound like I don't, but objectively as a modern car, they don't feel that modern. And I wish that Subaru would consider a turbo. Now the upcoming hybrid is gonna have more power and torque than the standard gas engine. So I think off the line and mid-range, it's definitely going to improve it and be more in line with that Rogue. So I'm excited to see what the Subaru Forester Hybrid's going to deliver. Definitely some needed performance and needed efficiency. In the Forester, even though you have all this nice glass around you, and Subaru is always talking about symmetrical all-wheel drive and the Boxer engine, mounting the engine and the drivetrain lower in the chassis for a lower center of gravity. Well, I feel I pitch more when I turn the wheel. I feel more roll and head toss in the Forester. It's not terrible, but versus the Rogue, it's definitely clear that this chassis would prefer to go straight, and the Rogue can handle more tight turns. But Subaru's all-wheel drive truly outperforms really anyone else in this segment. If you want all your wheels turning constantly without having to buy a true 4x4 truck, Subaru is where it's at. Like, it really is. And there's almost 9 inches of clearance on every single Forester, more on the Forester Wilderness that's going to be a 2026 model year vehicle. So for just pure utility and the fact that you can take these cars anywhere, I would rather take a Forester on a rough trail, and I know it could handle it because I've driven them there, than anything else, like a Rogue, nothing like that. So if your winters are horrible, or if you just want the added traction, I would say definitely go Forester. But you are going to give up the on-road performance that the Rogue and so many other competitors do a lot better. Forester gets there eventually, and if you're going to drive on the road and on back roads, the Forester is not my first choice, but the 2025 model is significantly better than before. The suspension's been retuned, the chassis is stiffer, so I credit Subaru for doing something useful to improve this performance. And braking's also good, but just like the handling, you're going to notice some more dive and pitch versus that Rogue. There's actual speed and performance in this Rogue that you will not find in any Subaru except the Outback or the Ascent, which are much bigger cars. On screen, the Rogue's 3-cylinder engine just seems weak. It seems small. How could it possibly move this car with any sort of verve? Well, the turbochargers in modern cars work wonders. Very responsive. This engine also sounds good. Where the Forester sounds gritty, this groans a little bit. It's a nice groan, almost a little growl and a snarl. And it's way more muted, so it never just rings into your eardrums like that Forester. And the behavior of this CVT is also really good. Subaru does a great job, and so does Nissan. They've both been building CVTs since like forever. So in in terms of the response of the transmission, including the paddle shifters if you want to use them to slow down. I think they're both pretty even there, but the engine on this Rogue is just superior. Another feature, and it's expensive on this Rogue, over $3,000, is ProPilot Assist 2.1. That is a true hands-free system. It's got a camera here that will watch my eye movement. I'm not gonna do that now because I'm not on a marked highway, but you'll see it. You got the head-up display, you got this digital display here for the instrument panel, and when that's active, it does cost a lot, but it's an extra that you just can't find on today's Subarus. The Rogue isn't that quiet, but it feels a little quieter than the Forester. Both of these cars really don't come with a ton of sound deadening because their prices don't really require them to have it. But I would expect the Rogue, being at this price, this is the Platinum, to ride just a bit quieter, to have some more insulation. It's not bad, but it could be better. Just a few turns in the Rogue, and it's immediately apparent this SUV can corner and corner flatter than the Forester. Turn in is more immediate. There's more feel in the steering wheel. And all of that translates to a ride that's not only more comfortable, it's more predictable. No compact SUV in this segment at this price is truly sporty. It doesn't need to be. But when I evaluate a car's handling, especially a higher riding crossover, I'm just looking for that secureness in the steering. And that's something the old Rogue really lacked. But the Forester really trails behind. And every day, I would rather be behind the wheel and turning the wheel of this Rogue. The downside might be the all-wheel drive system, because in really rough conditions, Subaru's system is always turning all four wheels, where Nissan's system is more of a traditional all-wheel drive system where it will only activate those axles when they're already slipping. This one is pretty good. It's more reactive than GM systems that I've tried, for example, or Toyota, for example. But if you really need something truly that's going to help you more off-road, especially that the Forester is going to come out with a wilderness trim, that might be your bet. But for normal winters on road, I don't think you're going to notice much of a difference. Where you do notice a difference is power. And the response, it's so much better. One fewer cylinder, a lot less displacement, but there's more horsepower, more torque, there's more immediacy. Next to the Forester, this thing feels quick. This is a modern SUV, and you're getting over 200 horsepower and a lot of response off the line, which is gonna make merging easier. It's gonna make passing easier. It's just gonna make you less stressed behind the wheel. Nissan also has similar driving modes that you'll find in the Subaru, not X mode, not quite as advanced, but there is a snow and an off-road mode. And if you choose the Rock Creek, you get special all-terrain tires. But of course, that's not gonna really handle or perform off-road like the Forester Wilderness will. We've reviewed plenty of the Wilderness trims, you can catch those. The ride quality and the surefootedness make this Rogue feel like another class above, where that Forester, even though it's a lower trim, you could drive the Forester Touring, which is fully loaded, comparable to this Rogue Platinum, and it won't feel as good behind the wheel, I can guarantee that. So day to day, I'd pick the Rogue just because it feels more upscale with this entire dashboard. It's just prettier looking. The controls are really more like an Infiniti, which is a good thing. Bad for Infiniti, great for a Nissan. And Subaru just feels older. If I'm spending this kind of money on a new car, I want to drive a new car. I want it to feel like a modern car. And that's where the Rogue wins. Body control around the turns, especially harder turns, is good. And so is the brake pedal feel. For most drivers, you're gonna feel perfectly comfortable and calm behind the wheel. The 2025 Subaru Forester starts at $30,000. There are 5 trims. Ours, the premium, was about $35,000. The 2025 Nissan Rogue starts at $29,000. There's also 5 trims. We had the Platinum all-wheel drive for around $47,000. That sounds like a really big spread, and it is. But buy a Forester Touring, the top trim with similar options, and it's $41,000. On the Nissan, you can remove ProPilot 2.1, which will save you over $3,000. So figure you'll spend about $43,000 on this example. The Subaru Forester is a great choice, especially in New England. It proves its mettle year after year. The all-wheel drive system, the visibility, and the value. But objectively, it's just not as good as the Nissan Rogue or any host of newer compact SUVs. And despite the Forester being brand new for 2025, it's the Rogue that after several years in this generation really outshines. Practicality inside and out. In terms of the style, it looks a whole lot better. The interior, when you're optioning up this much, looks a lot better than the top trims of the Forester. And just dollar per dollar, you're getting more car, more power, more technology. A lot of features that the Forester has not yet offered yet. So what do you think? Go to CarGurus.com, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time.